Hey there, guess what? If you're a farmer, you can have your low tunnels paid for by the NRCS. They have this cool new program where farmers can get $4 to $5 for each square foot to help with a Quick Hoops low tunnel system, frames and fabric included. It's like free money to help you grow more stuff on your farm. Want to learn more about Quick Hoops and the NRCS program? Click on the link below. One of the things that I know you've looked at from going through some of the research you've did is different forms of biochar. So all biochar is not created equal. You could use different feed materials. You can create them at different temperatures. Can you talk about the variability of biochar and how all biochar isn't equal? And if you say biochar, it's saying food when food is meat, it's dairy, and it's fruit.
So the best analogy that I use when I'm talking to people about biochar is it's very similar to receiving a recipe and an ingredients for baking a cake. Everyone would have the exact same ingredients. They're following the directions exactly of the mixing time, the time it takes to bake at a certain temperature, but everyone's cake wouldn't taste the same. There's just little nuances involved in the cooking process that results and magnifies itself in different tastes and different textures of the final cooked or baked product. This is very similar and analogous to biochar. Even though we have biochars that are created under the exact same conditions, there are other factors that go into the final product, just like in the baking analogy. So even though you might have a laboratory creating a biochar at 500 degrees Celsius, if we take that exact same apparatus now out of the lab into a field setting, it's still set to create the char at 500 degrees. But we've seen different chemical absorption capacities, different nutrient availabilities in those chars as a function of the different environments that those chars were created in.
And are the differences enough to make it hard to really interpret results? So it's one thing to say it's slightly more absorptive or it has a slightly higher cation exchange capacity, or is there a big difference between some of these?
Some of them, it's so variable that there's no universal guidance. There are some that are very small, non-significant differences. There are some that are statistically significant, but they have very low true value difference. By that, if they're within the same order of magnitude, it's really not going to have a different response in the soil. But there are those examples out there. Again, it's not the vast majority. It's the small portion of chars that do act very strangely, even though that they were created under the conditions of chars that we understood their behavior, or we thought we could predict their behavior.
Is this one of the reasons why it's really hard to get a handle on the efficacy of biochar, is because you do have all these different types of char functioning somewhat differently? You try and have somebody replicate a study, but if their definition of the biochar they're using is different than what the original study used, they may see these different results. So you end up with non-correlating studies.
Correct. And that's what confounds science, is the irreproducibility of this. The fact that I can conduct what I do a lot with the biochar is put them in soil incubations and look at the alteration in greenhouse gas production potentials. And it basically is mixing a little bit of biochar with soil, sealing them in a serum vial, and looking at the gas production with time. The fact that simple laboratory study depends on if I started them in the winter or the summer here in Minnesota, that has a corresponding effect on the gas production potentials I measure. I don't fully understand what's causing those differences, if it's just relative humidity, whether it's the age of the char from the time it was produced to the time the study was run. Those are all the missing bits we're still lacking in this.
One thing I've heard some people talk about around biochar is it can age over time and oxidize. Do you see that? You have biochar you just produced and then that sits on a shelf for 12 months or longer. You use it in the same study and you see potentially different results?
Yes, that's been one of the most frustrating parts of this is that the char itself oxidizes, whether we have it in soil or if it's sitting up on a shelf in a sealed container. If that container has oxygen present, these reactions do occur at different rates, depending on the temperature, depending on the storage conditions of that char. We still are lacking how do we keep a char for 3 months or for a year to be the exact same material that we had on day zero. These are all factors that are confounding the scientific part of it. Granted, some of these differences are non-significant, but we've known through time, some of the initial studies on carbon absorption showed 4 or 5 orders of magnitude change in the absorption capability of a material just to nitrogen over a period of 1 year. So these are all facets that we don't understand yet how to subdivide or segregate based on the importance to the state.
If you enjoy farm podcasts, then tune into Carrot Cash Flow for all things farm business. Join us as we explore the latest trends, tips, and stories from market farmers running businesses just like yours. Whether you're a seasoned farmer or just starting out, our podcast has something for everyone. Listen in and grow with us. Available on all major podcast platforms. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Carrot Cash Flow today.